Hello guys, today we will discuss about ruby laser. So what is ruby laser? So ruby laser is a solid state laser where it uses ruby crystals as active laser medium. So what is ruby crystals? Ruby crystals are nothing but aluminum oxide. However, it is doped with chromium. How much? Around 0.05% of aluminum ions are replaced by chromium ions. And these chromiums in the ruby crystals are responsible for the lasing operation of ruby crystals, and it also responsible for the characteristic red color of ruby crystals. Ruby crystals emits red light of wavelength 694.3 nanometer. It was invented by Lehman in the Hughes Research Laboratory in the 1960. If we see the construction, the main part of a ruby laser is a single crystal ruby of cylindrical form. Here it is, and one side of the cylinder is highly polished or highly silvered, and other side is partly polished or partly silvered, and it is surrounded by a glass tube, and which is again surrounded by a xenon flash tube. And this xenon flash tube acts as an optical pumping system, and it can produce flashes of few milliseconds. Here, another important part is this cooling system. Why this cooling system is required? Because when xenon flash tube is made switch on, it emits thousands of joules of energy in few milliseconds. But only a part of that energy is utilized by the chromium ions, while the rest of energy heats up the apparatus. A cooling arrangement is provided to keep the experimental setup at normal temperature. Okay. Now, if we see the working, then this ruby laser uses three-level pumping scheme. That is, it has three energy states: the ground state and two energy states, E1 and E2. Here, the excited state E1 is a metastable state. The mean life of the metastable state E1 is about 10 to the power 5 times of the mean life of the excited state E2. So what happens when the flash tube is switched on? Then lights fall on the chromium in the ground state energy. So a large number of chromium atoms in the ground state energy absorbs this light and make a transition to the excited state E2. However, as the lifetime of the excited state is very small, they make a non-radiative transition to the excited state E1. In this way, we can produce a population inversion between the excited state E1 and ground state. When the atoms in the excited state E1 makes a transition to the ground state, we get the characteristic red light of the laser, of the ruby laser. However, the procedure is not that simple. The production of this highly intense, highly directional, coherent beam of red light is not that simple. What happened? In the beginning, the chromium atoms in the metastable state suffer a spontaneous transition to the ground state. The spontaneously emitted photons propagate in all directions, but those traveling parallel to the axis of the ruby cylinder are repeatedly reflected by the mirrors of the laser cavity, that is, by this polished surface. The photons making many trips through the cylinder produces the stimulated emission of light by interaction with the chromium atoms in the metastable state. The intensity of light propagating parallel to the axis of the ruby rod is thus largely amplified, and in this way we get an intense, highly directional, coherent beam of red light of wavelength 694.3 nanometer. So these are the working which I have already explained. If we see the advantages of ruby laser, then we will find that it is cost effective, and since it is a solid state laser, it has therefore no chance of wasting active medium, and the construction and function of ruby laser is self-explanatory. It also has obviously some drawbacks, and these are: the laser require high pumping power, the efficiency of ruby laser is very small, and it is a pulse laser. What is pulse laser? That is those kind of laser which emit laser as pulses, laser light as pulses. And where these ruby lasers can be used, ruby laser find many applications, such as in optical photography. It can be used for measurement of plasma properties such as electron density and temperature. Ruby lasers are used to remove the melanin of the skin. Ruby laser can be used for recording of hologram and so on. Thank you.